Well, thank you so much, Chelsea, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today about yoga, meditation, and pregnancy.
Same here, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. So I am Dr. Chelsea Jackson Roberts. I share the doctor part because there are a lot of educators out there who may go into education and may think that there's only one path with that education trajectory. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of took the untraditional path. And I'm a former elementary school teacher. I taught first, second, and third grade, but mostly third graders. And during that time, I felt overwhelmed. If you have educators, teachers out there listening, I know they can relate. I know that we're headed back to school right now. And so for me, it was important to still stay true to what it was that I was passionate about, and that was education. And so when I was an educator, or still an educator, when I was a public school teacher, I started practicing yoga a lot more regularly. I ventured into it right after I graduated from Spelman,
Yes,
and
yes. Shout out to the
yes, we have that in
HBCUs.
common. Yes.
Yes.
And so I started right after then, and I just noticed a change in my own life. And I said, well, what would happen if I started introducing this into the classroom? And it wasn't like a full length yoga class. We
Sure.
didn't even really call it yoga. It was mindful moments, or just taking a moment to breathe, to stretch. And so later on in life, I decided I wanted to look into this a lot more. And so I decided to pursue a PhD at Emory University in educational studies, where I
Mm-hmm.
focused on the ways in which yoga and meditation and mindful practices impact how young people, particularly young girls of color who self identify as such, how it impacted not only how they navigated school, but their
Mm-hmm.
relationships, life, and the rest is history. Now I'm at Peloton as
Mm-hmm.
a Peloton yoga and meditation instructor, and a lot of people will say, so how did you decide to, leave being in the classroom altogether? And for me, it's the same type of offering, just a different setting. And
Mm.
for me, I want to cast the widest net as possible for people to have access to the practice of yoga and meditation. And so now I'm just a teacher in a different way. So
Love
that's
it,
my
love it, love it.
story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can relate to taking a different path. I'm a physician now, an OBGYN, but
Okay.
my undergraduate majors were math and mechanical engineering. And
Wow.
yeah, and then I can also relate to educators. I come from a family of educators. My mom taught math for 50 years. My
Mm-hmm.
sister's an assistant principal. So, all of the things. I have a cousins, aunts who are principals. So I'm sort of the oddball in that regard. So I have a special soft spot for educators too, because they're certainly
Yes.
underappreciated. All right. So what type of training did you go through in order to become a yoga and meditation instructor?
Yeah, so initially it was a 200-hour teacher's training. I had studied in Atlanta where my husband and I, Shane, met. And I started, after doing the 200 hours, I started teaching, practicing,
Mm-hmm.
of course, but teaching more like on the weekends, in the evenings after I was finished teaching school. And I didn't feel exhausted or depleted. It was actually something I looked forward to because it was what I used to kind of, decompress from the day. And so
Sure.
it was something about being able to share that with people in my community that was really great. And so from that point forward, I just continued to further my education with continuing education classes, more trainings. I'm trained in Yoga Nidra, which is the practice of really allowing the entire nervous system, the body to relax. I studied under instructor Tracy Stanley. And so I got trained in youth, yoga and meditation for youth. And I just continue. I'm a lifelong learner. So you are probably not ever gonna not see me in some way in a school setting. So
Yes, I hear
yes.
you. Yeah. And I ask all of my guests their training and education because I think it's important to see how folks are so serious and passionate and committed to their work and continuing to improve it and have that sort of
Mhm.
inner drive and push to just do better and bring your best self to your work.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, what type of yoga do you focus on specifically? Is there a specific type? And if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I am a hatha yoga teacher, and that is really the umbrella in which any type of yoga pretty much that you hear about lives under. There's different, ashtanga, there's vinyasa, there's, all of these dynamic types of practices. And then I mentioned just now yoga nidra, which is what I love, the deep relaxation
Mm-hmm.
aspects of yoga. And I do that because it's what I needed. It's what I need each and every day. Even after teaching yoga, I need to have some type of practice that allows my body to be held. I say that a lot, allowing our bodies to be held, to be
Mm-hmm.
supported. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just know in this world where, especially where we live, I'm in New York City, but in the US in particular, where we are constantly producing, constantly multitasking, we are yearning for those spaces and outlets that we can just say, you know what, all I had the capacity for today is just to breathe. And
Yes.
so I love to specialize in deep relaxation, yoga practices, and meditations as well.
Nice. Love it, love it, love it. So, let's talk about yoga, meditation, and pregnancy. So, do you think it's important to have both a yoga and a meditation practice?
Yeah, so yoga and meditation go hand in hand. So when I think about yoga, I think about this physical aspect. By definition, yoga means to unite, to join, to yoke. And so essentially what we're doing is connecting our body, our mind, our breath, our heart, so that when we go out into the world, into action, we're coming from a more grounded and anchored place. So we're learning how to be present, whether it's through our body,
Mm-hmm.
doing motions, movements, asana, what we call it in yoga. And then with meditation, although meditation is primarily focused on the breath, there are different types of meditations. I mentioned yoga nidra is a meditation. There's visualization. There's, you can count backwards. Just as
Mm-hmm.
long as in meditation you have this one point of focus. And one of the things that has been the most challenging part for me, as
Mm-hmm.
well as my students that I hear, is like, I just can't get my mind to turn off,
Yes.
to settle
Yes.
down. I'm
Yes.
very distracted. And so when we couple this moving meditation together with that meditation, sometimes that allows our body to let go, to discharge of the things that we've accumulated through the day. So that's why I love the practice of physical yoga in addition to meditation, because if it is a challenge for you to just sit still, which
Right.
we're human, it is hard, it
Absolutely.
gives us a chance for us to discharge and let go of anything that is taking over our nervous system at the time. So
Yeah.
yes, all of that to say yes, I think that it is essential for us to find opportunities to do that. I know that as a physician
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you have probably studied a lot about the nervous system. And I think about the studies that were done, out in the wild, out in the forest with possums in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And when they, were in danger, they would, when they got out of danger and they went through that fight, flight, or freeze, and then they knew that they were safe, they still do it. They begin to shake. And it's like they're shaking so that they can reset their nervous system back to the state that it was before the trauma happened. And I know that as a human being, we go through traumas, both small and large, daily, over time, abrupt, like whatever it may be. And so I think as a parent, which I'm just embarking on that journey myself,
Uh-huh.
it's just like I know that there are going to be twists and turns along that journey to where I'm going to be like, I need to, reset this
Sure.
entire body, mind, and my spirit. So, yes,
Yes,
yoga and meditation
absolutely,
for the parents out
absolutely.
there.
And one of the things that I love about, what you talk about in your classes and teachings is things like you don't have to be perfect. Like sometimes, like your mind may wander, just gently bring it back. Or you
Hmm.
don't, for yoga, you can come to it however you come to it. And some days you may
Yes.
be ready to really go full throttle. Some days you can just, it's going to be the most basic of things. You just bring yourself to the practice and do the best you can in the moment.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, why don't we talk about some of the benefits of yoga specifically during pregnancy? So, what are two or three benefits of yoga that you believe are important during pregnancy specifically?
Yeah, I love one of my favorite aspects of yoga is this focus on the breath. It's like, even if what I love about yoga is that even though I think that there's a misconception about like who yoga is for, what a yogi is, what a yogi looks like, the body type, if you have to be super flexible. At the end of the day, it's really about allowing yourself to be present. And so one of the benefits for me that I found is being present. I'm able to focus my mind, my body, everything on my breath. So oftentimes you've practiced with me on Peloton. I
Mm-hmm.
will just start in the first minute of let's just sit here for a moment and take a deep breath, just so that we can take survey of the things that we've experienced throughout the day, the things that we no longer want to carry, even if it's just for the 30 minutes of doing the yoga class. And so one of the benefits is practicing being
Mm-hmm.
present to how your body feels, how your mind feels, and really without judgment. And I think that the more that we practice it, it's not going to happen overnight where we're just like, oh, I'm not going to judge that, that wasn't the best yoga practice I've ever had. But I think that the more that we have opportunities to be attuned with our body and our mind and our heart and our spirit and whatever you want to name it, the more opportunities we have to practice to do exactly what you just said, to let go of the perfection, to let go of, thinking that it's only going to be a good session if I can get through this many poses or do it for this long of time. Sometimes we only have 5 minutes. And so the benefit for me is allowing myself to be present so that I can make a clear decision on how I want to move into the next phase of the day, of the week, of my life. Another benefit for me has been just this cultivating honesty with myself. In yoga, there is a sacred text called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and in it is very much this almost this framework for how to live a conscious life. And in the yamas and the niyamas, one of the yamas is about nonviolence, so being kind and patient to ourselves. So when I step onto the mat, I make an agreement with myself, Chelsea, you are going to be kind and patient with yourself through this practice. But I'm also being so aware that I'm also grounded in the truth of what I need and I don't need. One
Mm.
day I may think that I'm going to come in and do this super dynamic practice where I think I'm going to end in a full sweat, or maybe I'm just going to curl up in the fetal position and allow myself to let it
Oh,
go for the
okay.
day.
Yes.
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 And so, I think that one of the benefits is, the more that we're present with what our body needs in the moment or does not need, the more we can stay grounded in the truth and walk through this world, move through this world with integrity.
Yes, yes. And that can be really important in pregnancy when you're going through so many changes physically,
Hmm.
mentally, to have that place in that space where you can connect and stay grounded for sure.
Yes.
How do you feel? Does meditation offer similar benefits or more benefits? What type of benefits have meditation brought during pregnancy?
Yeah, again, it's the same. I think that meditation, I started meditation after I started practicing yoga. And again, meditation is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love it when a student for the first time experiences meditation and they're just like, I just can't turn my mind off. I just cannot let it go. And I'm like, I know,
Yeah,
right? It's
yes,
like,
I am. It's the same way. Yes.
exactly, because we're human and
Mm-hmm.
because we are, not living, most of us are not living in an ashram, not living at the mountaintop where we can tune out all of the. I live in New York City.
Yep.
Can I tell
Okay.
you,
Yes.
just 5 seconds ago, there was like someone having a cussing match in front of the doorstep, and I was like, I
Like
have to do
what?
a podcast in 5 minutes, and
Right.
they're like in a full. So it's just like, this is life. And so we have to be honest about, all of the things that life throws at us.
Mm-hmm.
And so for meditation, it's a challenge, but take your time. with it. And so, yeah, I think that the benefits are just as equal, if not more.
Sure.
Yoga started out as these tenets of philosophy. It wasn't even a physical practice first.
Right.
It was this way of governing ourselves through those yamas and the niyamas. It was a way of sitting, listening to the breath. And so to me, I think that meditation is quite advanced, but I think that we are all capable of having a meditation practice if we also insert that kindness and truth within the foundation of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to touch upon something you said that sometimes people have misconceptions about who does yoga and what you need to be in order to do yoga.
hmm
So, can you touch upon what are some of those misconceptions and myths that you just want to bust wide open?
Yeah, I think for being in the Western world, I'll speak on behalf of like being in the US, being in a space where, we have access to globally to so much
Mm-hmm.
information. I think that when it comes time to market yoga, this is what I've noticed over the 20 plus years of being a practitioner, is that folks want to package it in a way that it is something to be attained to or to get to. And I think that we have to remember that you can't compartmentalize even yoga as it is in the Western world, in a capitalist society, in all of these moments where we know that there's imbalance in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always like to remind folks that, yoga is a microcosm. Yoga communities can be a microcosm for what we have in a global world. And so we have to be mindful of that and not think that, oh, when I go to my yoga class, all of these things go away. That was one of the challenges for me when I started, that I didn't have a lot of examples of teachers. While there were teachers for sure, shout out to Maya Breuer, Dr. Gail Parker. I think about Faith Hunter, seeing her on the cover of Yoga Journal as when I saw the first Black woman to be on the cover of Yoga Journal. Since then, I've been on the cover of the Yoga Journal magazine twice. And I think that the more that we see our reflection, the more that we hear our accents, the more that we see our body types, that we're reminded that, yeah, we belong here too. On Peloton, my thing is that I love to go through the genres of music because I want to meet people, invite people in ways that make them feel safe or at
Can we
least
talk about the trap yoga flow, please? Please,
exactly
because
trap
that was on
yoga.
point. Yes.
Exactly. Listen, I'm a child of hip hop, hence my I have on an Outcast t-shirt right
Yes.
now. And
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like I'm thinking, what would I have felt more comfortable with? And it's not to dishonor, it is not to, ever make light of or diminish the potency, the sanctity of yoga and its roots. There have been traces in the continent of Africa, and overwhelmingly, we have the research that says that yoga has been traced back from India thousands of years ago.
Yes.
You can
Mm-hmm.
honor that. I often talk about the both and I
Yes.
can also have a gospel yoga genre class because when I think about the history of the Black church, when I think about the ways that music has been able to summons people, community together to move into action, to love each other, that's all that I want to do when I
Mm-hmm.
insert these different genres
Mm-hmm.
into inviting people to the mat so that
Mm-hmm.
you're welcome. And if it looks like trap music, come through.
Yes, 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 yes. That I love your trap yoga. I love your Beyonce seat class. Love it, love it, love it. So
Yes,
I think that's
thank
just
you.
just so it's just so important to understand like it's something that's for everyone. For lack of a better way
hmm
of putting it, especially in the US, yoga has had been kind of like I'm just like thin white women, and that was
Yep,
it. You know what I mean?
yep,
and
yep,
and it's for anyone, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your body size.
yep,
Anyone can come to the mat and get benefit from it.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, how about how has yoga? Well, first let's talk about yoga for you in your own pregnancy. So, how do you feel
Uh-huh.
like yoga has helped you in your pregnancy and navigating the changes in your body? Because we know that pregnancy changes our bodies. So how's that
Yeah.
helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now I'm hot. My hormones are changing. As I sit here, I'm like, woo, I'm about to yell to my husband and turn the air on. Like I'm sitting here, I'm hot. And so I'm like, there's a yoga practice for that.
Right.
There's a breath work for that. It's called the
Right.
Satali breath that I often share with my students, the cooling
Right.
breath. And it's so like when I think about, wow, I've accumulated all of these tools, so that for my biggest yoga practice yet, I have these things in my back pocket. I have no idea who I'm going to be as a mother once
Mm-hmm.
the little human being is here right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I have an idea, I have goals, I have an intention. However, just like I didn't know who I was going to be when I walked into my first hot yoga class and fainted, had
Sure.
no idea that was going to happen.
Right.
And I had
Right.
to roll with it. And
Right.
it's like my yoga practice has been in place to teach me how to roll with the punches, the twists and turns of life, the ebbs and the flows, be the both and in every moment. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I know that I still have this breath right now. So if my baby is crying and I don't know why he's crying, and Chelsea, take a breath. Or when Shane, my husband, if he's a yogi too, he's a
Mm-hmm.
certified yoga instructor too. I had never been married before. We just celebrated 7 years of being married. And I hadn't been married before, had no idea what that was going to be like. But there were moments where I had to bring my yoga practice in as we communicated, as
Sure.
we took moments apart from each other and had our own moments of deep breaths and came back
Mm-hmm.
together and breathed together. So I think that I know that this practice has not been happenstance. It hasn't been like this arbitrary thing. It's like, oh, wow, that's why I learned that.
Right.
So that, when these moments come up, how dare I not use what I've been teaching to the world
Sure.
in my own individual experience that's full of uncertainty?
Absolutely. Yeah, pregnancy and the birth as well. Are you
Yes.
are you worried at all when you think about birth or
I
getting to
don't
that
think
point?
I'm I don't think I'm there yet to where, I certainly grown even in the last 2 weeks. I'm 30 weeks to today. I'm 30
Hmm.
weeks today. And to hear myself, I had to say it to somebody today. I was like, whoa, how did that happen? So I think that I'm processing that I'm in week 30 right
Sure.
now. And probably as we go on, but I have not, it has not been something that has brought me anxiety. Who
That,
knows?
that's amazing. Yes, that is amazing. That is amazing. So, if someone is interested in starting a yoga or meditation practice, what are a couple of pieces of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I always go to what my teacher, Swami Jai Devi, would say is that don't let your yoga practice be one more thing that you use to beat yourself up.
Mm,
Like let go of perfectionism. Let go of thinking that it has to be this beautiful thing tied with this really neat ribbon.
mm,
That my yoga practice may look like getting 2 minutes in of sitting and stretching my arms up, bringing my hands to my heart center and taking a deep breath. I recommend that people start off slowly, like not over anything that we're doing for the first time. About to have a baby. I'm going to see a lot of firsts in front of
mm.
my face, and I can imagine that there's going to be moments where he will fall, where he will, learn life in these ways. And so coming back to that element of curiosity, I think is the best way to approach anything new, especially our yoga practice, because when you think about yoga, it is this thing that is so centered on us. It's like there's not too many things that can distract us. And I think that that's why people are afraid of yoga in many ways. And I'm saying
Mm,
the word fear. Like I've had students who have said, I wasn't going to come to your yoga class until I saw you do it or until I heard the music that made
right.
me feel safe. And
Right.
so it is scary when you pull off all the layers and you have nothing but yourself sitting or standing or moving there on your yoga mat, and I can't pull those things that kind of take me away. Now I'm sitting here and wondering why I'm crying at the end of Shavasana
Hmm.
because I've allowed all of my centeredness, all of my awareness to be placed on really what I'm feeling.
Right.
And this
Right.
human experience is a
Right.
lot.
Right. It
It's the
is.
joy, it's the suffering, it's the love, it's the frustration, it's all
Yes.
of that. And
Yes.
so to remember, that fullness so that we can live the most fullest lives ever. And yoga certainly helps me do that. So start off small increments, start out
Yeah.
slowly and love yourself every step of the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Love that. Love that. Love that. So, are there any particular poses that you think are great for pregnant folks?
Yeah, so I think that, well, first, always consult your physician or
Absolutely.
medical professional,
Yeah.
and I always like to say that because there are things that I thought that would feel really comfortable in my body that was recommended in a prenatal class. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. My body doesn't like that. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing is start to trust yourself, like especially for first time parents.
Yeah.
This is a great place to practice trusting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the best way to trust yourself is being honest and listening, like taking
Mm-hmm.
a moment to pause and listen and say, does
Sure.
this feel right in my body? Does this
Right.
feel right in how I'm moving in the world? And so, starting there, I think that it's important to parent ourselves through the process because now we have to parent this whole human, and many times there are elements that we may, whatever our childhood may have been, that we may have missed. Our parents may have done the best that they could,
Mm-hmm.
but there were moments where we get the opportunity to experiencing parenting, so why not include ourselves through that process? And so
Mm.
I say to do those practices that allow yourself to take care of you.
Mm.
That's why I say the deep relaxation, the restorative yoga classes, the yoga nidra classes. Like,
Yes.
y'all, this is where the yoga begins. That's
Right.
what
Right.
the
Right.
Pantanjali Yoga Sutras would say, is like the yoga begins now. And it's like, if we allow ourselves to slow down enough to be present with what it is that we're experiencing, that's when we move from a more grounded, anchored, and compassionate place. And so that's what
Yes.
my advice is. Take it
Yes.
slowly,
Yes. Yeah.
luxuriate in the practice.
Absolutely. And I think what one thing that I've found, and maybe you've heard your students say the same thing, is that slowing down in the moment of yoga actually helps you to bring your best self to your other areas of your life,
Hmm.
and you end up showing up in those areas in a better way, in a
Yep.
way that is not as stressful, in a way that actually helps you to maybe be more productive in things
Right.
that you're doing. That slowing down is really key and important to helping you bring your best self in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. We see more and more, professional athletes practicing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen LeBron James practicing yoga back in the 80s and 90s. Could different NBA players, NFL players,
Sure.
where yoga was really getting popular. So yeah, and you see a lot of corporate spaces
Mm-hmm.
integrating yoga to say, wow. Now, I'm not always a fan of saying use your yoga practice to produce more, but it
Absolutely.
can
Yeah.
certainly be a tool for people to be present in whatever space they're occupying. So if that's in your profession or your job, yeah, it definitely strengthens the different aspects of our lives.
Sure, sure, sure. And then as we wrap up, a couple things. Can you talk a little bit more about your concept? You mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important for people to hear. What do you mean when you say both and?
Yeah, so it's like not this either or. I don't think that life can ever be lived in this polarizing way because there's so much in between. One of my favorite teachers, I always say one of my first yoga teachers, James Baldwin,
Mm,
who may or may not have ever done the physical practice of yoga, but whenever
right.
I hear his voice or read his writings, I'm like, oh, James Baldwin was a yogi. Like, and when he would talk specifically about suffering, and even when I say the word suffering, I can sometimes look out into an audience and see a visceral reaction. Like, why is she talking about suffering? I thought we were
Right.
supposed to be talking about yoga
Right.
and, feeling good. And it's just like, I remember James Baldwin in an interview saying that the more that we understand our own personal suffering, the
Mm-hmm.
more we understand the suffering of others. And
Mm,
so we take that suffering as a way to practice empathy so that we can go deeper and move into love. And so
Mm,
we have to have the both and we
yeah,
have to have acknowledge and understand the suffering in order to understand and acknowledge the joy. We have to have those moments, the light, the dark, the yin, the yang, all of those different ways that we see that duality that people talk about in yoga.
sure.
It has to be this both and in order for us to have a full experience. And
Yeah,
so that's why
yeah.
I'm always like the both and is on Sunday I'm teaching gospel yoga, on Monday I'm teaching trap yoga.
Right, right,
One day it
right.
may be this, it's just like I'm the
There you
both
go.
and,
There you go.
y'all.
The both and may be like, I am so grateful that I am pregnant, at least for me
Yep.
personally. But at the same time, I this is I'm hot and my body is. I didn't. Me personally, I did not like being pregnant, other than feeling the movement. But I was still
See?
grateful, for both of
Right.
my babies. So yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, and
yeah.
I think that there's a taboo around that sometimes, and to me,
Mm-hmm.
it just diminishes and silences our capacity to be a human and to understand the fullness of life and see it in other people.
Yeah.
And so, the more that we don't have that a detachment from like seeing something, oftentimes when you're triggered by something that you see in somebody else is often because you can identify it
Oop,
with
Chelsea,
it
are you still
within
there? I think
yourself. And it's
it
like,
paused
oh,
for a
I don't like
second.
that they said that. And then if you just pause a second, you're like, I don't like it because when I say it, I don't like when I say it. And so I think it's important for us to practice seeing the both end within ourselves so that when conflict comes up, we are more
Oh,
in a space
can
of
you hear
communication
me?
than of saying, I'm not like that person at all. Speaking specifically to acknowledging the both and within ourselves so that when we see those things that may trigger us in another person or we're in conflict with someone else, where we can completely separate ourselves from that person. But instead, if we're more connected with the fullness of who we are, it brings more understanding for us to actually be in communication with that
Yes,
person that we think that we're in opposition with. And,
absolutely.
I am definitely an advocate of freedom, of liberation, of justice, of
Right.
equity, all of those things. So I think that it's also starting to be understood more that folks who practice yoga, it's not just all about just going with the flow and
Mm-hmm.
everything's at peace. Again, it's that both and it's
Right.
being so grounded in the truth, it's being so grounded in what love looks like, what compassion looks like, that I can also be an advocate, in those moments where there's injustice. And so that's the both
100%.
and. That's the both
Absolutely.
and for me as well.
Love it, love it, love it. So, last couple questions, and I ask all of my guests this. What is the most frustrating part of your work?
The most frustrating part of this work is folks thinking that this place is not for them. And it's not so much put on those people who think that it's not for them, it's
Right.
more so for how yoga is portrayed out in the media at times.
Sure. Sure.
Sometimes I cringe when people think, you have to be able to do a back bend, you have to be able to do a handstand. We just talked about you have to have a certain body type, all of these things. That is frustrating that
Mm-hmm.
folks that they move away from it or don't go towards it because they don't think that they're included.
Sure. Sure. I understand that.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, what's the most rewarding part of your work?
When people realize that the practice is for them, when they
Right.
have those aha moments on the mat, whether I can see them or not, whether they're sending me a message or an email saying that I never thought that I would make it through an entire yoga class, or
Right.
when the parent says that my child requested to listen to one of your meditations because they were having
Mm.
a frustrating day at school
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
said that they knew that the meditation would help them.
Mm.
Those are those rewarding moments when I see people apply what we do on the mat out into the
Sure.
world.
Love it. Yeah, that's amazing. So, what is your favorite piece of advice that you would give to expectant moms, expectant parents?
Yeah. My teacher's teacher, Ma, I
Mm-hmm.
just mentioned Swami Jayadevi, and her teacher, also my teacher, would always have this mantra of saying, you must drink as you pour, which means, as you pour out into your loved ones, that little baby, that child who's growing up in the world, just remember that you have to find those things in life that allow you to drink as you are pouring out. And so for me,
Mm,
drinking in looks like my yoga and meditation practice. It looks like I just went home to Dayton, Ohio to see my parents and my grandmothers who have seen me pregnant for the first time ever.
aw,
That joy, that love, that was
sure.
me drinking in order for me to say, all right,
Yeah.
let's go back in,
Right.
and so
Right.
I say
Right.
that to all the parents that we are doing miraculous work, one by creating humans or parenting humans, however
Mm-hmm.
those humans come into your life,
Mm-hmm.
whatever your path may be to parenthood, and to
Mm-hmm.
know that as you give and as you offer, that you have to make sure that you establish those things that pour back into you.
Yes. Love that. Love that. So, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so on social media, I'm Chelsea Loves Yoga, and that's my website. And to practice with me with a plethora of offerings, including trap yoga,
Yes.
you can find me at Peloton. And a lot of people don't realize that you don't have to have the equipment, you don't have to have the bike or the tread to be able to connect with Peloton. All you need is
Yeah.
that smartphone. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually I started off with just the app.
Yep.
I just got the tread a few months ago for well over a year. I just use the
Uh-huh.
app. So you really don't have to
Yeah, yeah.
have the equipment. And yes, y'all, she has a plethora of offerings and just an amazing spirit that and your energy just shines through.
Oh,
So I'm
thank you, Nicole.
delighted to have chatted with you today.
Same here. Thank you for having me.